America, and we hope they things that Americans MCs and the mission is to so they
Thank you, James, and good morning to everybody. So wonderful to be here today for today's program. Happy holiday. Wish everybody making it. Yeah, Monterey food watch as well as all of our speakers and operators for being during the holiday season. We really appreciate you taking the time away from your holidays or your vacation to join us for today's program. We also want to thank all of our viewers tuning in from Indonesia and around the region, including the Philippines and the Maldives. So thank you so much for joining us. And we are this is such an important topic for us here at the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta because illegal fishing, whether it's as part of the commercial trade of fishing or trafficking of fish, is such an important issue in this region, and that it's one of the fish hubs of the world. And today we have an esteemed group of speakers who are going to address the issue, and we will learn also about how Monterey Bay Aquarium is working to help bring more sustainable fisheries and aquaculture to both the region and around the world. So with that, I'll pass it back over to you, James, and I hope you all enjoy today's program.
You in good health and always happy, almost the end of the year. I want to say hello to the audience from Philippines, Maldives, and as well in Jakarta. Hi guys, thank you for joining us today. If there are any other from in Maldives, please put some comment on our channel. I can greet you live. Myself, my name is Leah. I will be together with you in today's event. You have probably noticed that we are going to have 3 presentations from 3 our amazing speakers. I want to say hi one by one to them. For the one check I'm doing great. We have Songling Wang. Hi, Songling.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Where are you based now?
Yeah, I'm based in Qingdao.
Okay, China. Okay, yeah. Great to see you.
It's a real pleasure.
Yeah. So next speakers we have Patrick Ko. Hi, Patrick.
Hey, Gandia.
Hi, how are you?
All right. Happy to be.
Looking good. Good. I'm good. I'm based in Bali, so everything is always bright in Bali.
Nice.
Okay, let's begin with the first speaker, Shelly Dearhart from Monterey Bay Aquarium. For those who don't know, Shelly has been working with the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch program since July 2018. Currently, she is a senior fishery scientist, and after receiving her bachelor degree from Clemson University in both biological science and psychology, she began her career as an environmental educator with the South Carolina Aquarium based in Charleston. Please give virtual applause to Shelly. Shelly, the webinar is yours.
All right. Hello again. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my presentation. Hopefully y'all will be able to see it okay. Let's see. And let's start there. All right. It looks like it's loading. Here we go. Y'all can see the presentation, hopefully.
Yes, it looks good.
Great. Okay. Well, again, thank you for joining us this morning. Again, my name is Shelly, and I've been working with Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch for about 2.5 years now. And so today we're just going to talk very generally about the program and what we do, and it will hopefully kind of lead into what the other two speakers will be touching on today with wild caught fisheries and aquaculture practices. So with the ever growing amount of seafood that is needed to feed the world today, sustainability is more important than ever. And there are three main pillars to what sustainability is. And one component of that is environmental protection. Another is social responsibility. And the final pillar is economic viability. All three are incredibly important when it comes to the Seafood Watch program and what we do to offer recommendations to consumers and chefs and students and suppliers. We really focus our work on the environmental components. And so that's what we're going to touch on a little bit today. I'm going to generally talk a little bit about some different fishing practices and different wild caught fishery methods, and then how we apply our criteria to assess those fisheries on a global scale, and then move into some of the aquaculture production methods and bring in some of the other components that come into play when assessing sustainability from the Seafood Watch criteria. And then we can kind of talk about that output, what that report looks like. So just to go ahead and jump into the first set of fishing methods, I am going to zoom out of here and jump into a video session because I want to show you a few different fishing methods that we didn't have still photos for. What you're looking at currently are trolling lines and pull and line caught methods. And so essentially this has fairly little impact on habitat. It targets certain species and has a very low interaction with unwanted or untargeted species, which is something we'll touch on in just a few minutes. But these are all factors that go into the importance of considering a fishery sustainable or not. Essentially, they're lines that are drawn behind a boat and they're baited, and so the fish can come up and bite them and they can just reel them in, and there's your catch. So those two are fairly simple. I'm gonna see here if I can jump into the videos that we have, and we'll play just a couple of these really quickly. All right, let's start here.
Traps vary in size and shape, but can be used to catch a variety of fish and shellfish. They're weighted to rest on the sea floor and are often attached to one another to form a chain. Traps have funnel-shaped doors that lead to the bait.
So that was just one other example. Those are traps that you can drop down onto the seafloor, as the video was suggesting. Your catch will crawl in. There are opportunities for unwanted catch to crawl out, and then we'll move on to bottom trawl.
Bottom trawl is a type of fishing net that's pulled along the seafloor. Fishermen commonly use bottom trawls to catch shrimp and bottom-dwelling fish like halibut and sole. In addition to these target fish, however, the nets also catch a variety of ocean life that's usually thrown back dead or dying. Dragging heavy gear across the seabed can also damage sensitive seafloor habitat.
So two things that they mentioned that are slightly different with this particular fishery. You notice that this is a type of net that as it's drawing across the ocean floor, or if it's mid-water, it's just catching everything in its path. And so unwanted species are often a repercussion of that. And if it is a bottom trawl, again, like the video is suggesting, it is potentially disrupting a lot of habitat on the seafloor. So another type of fishing method.
Line vessels deploy miles of fishing lines in the open ocean in pursuit of fish like mahi-mahi, tunas, and swordfish. These vessels have the capacity to set up to 50 miles of baited hooks that can be left to soak overnight or for several days. Along with capturing the target fish, the hooks may also ensnare a variety of ocean animals, including sharks, endangered sea turtles, seabirds, and marine mammals.
So again, just another example of it looks very similar to what a simple pull and line might look like. However, it's a long, extended line, sometimes miles long, with multiple hooks that just sits in the water. So ultimately, and unfortunately, there can be a lot of unintended catch with the long lines as well. So moving into gill nets.
Walls of netting designed to entangle fish. These nets can also accidentally catch ocean animals like sea turtles, marine mammals, and sharks.
So again, very efficient with catching, but gill nets, trawling, long lines are all types of fisheries that we have to be careful with from that bycatch standpoint. And then this last video that I have is something called a purse seine.
Nets to capture schooling fish like tunas, salmon, and anchovies. Sometimes fishing vessels deploy floating rafts called fish aggregating devices, also called FADs, to attract fish in the open ocean. Large nets encircle the school of fish, as well as other animals that may be attracted to the FAD. The bottom of the net is drawn shut to prevent the fish from escaping. And then the nets and the fish are gathered into the fishing vessel. When purse seiners use FADs, the accidental catch of juvenile fish, sharks, and other vulnerable animals can be a serious conservation concern. By eliminating the use of FADs, purse seiners can significantly reduce the number of animals that are accidentally caught by this fishing method.
And so this just gives you an example of, let's get back to how you can modify your method of fishing to make it more sustainable for the fishery. Just like the video was saying, not using those FADs is a way to decrease or possibly even eliminate bycatch in those purse seine fisheries. So there are modifications that you can make to make the fishery more sustainable and still use the type of gear that is efficient to catch the species that you're hoping to catch. So this next slide here just shows two other fishing methods. One is a beach seine, where you can kind of see it's a similar setup as the purse seine, except it doesn't fully circle the school of fish. Essentially, it's a wall of net that you can slide or pull in and corral the fish in towards the shore. And then finally, this photo on the right. This is a jig fishery, which typically highlights species like squid, where you can see again, just adding in something as simple as light on top of the water surface is something that will attract the squid up to the surface and get them a little bit more interested in that food. So just a lot of interesting different types of methods, and all of those methods have a wide variety of ranges of use. And so I wanted to move into what we consider when we're looking at any of these types of fisheries in terms of their level of sustainability. So the wild caught fisheries standard, or the criteria that Seafood Watch uses, first looks at the species itself. We want to look at how abundant they are in the wild and also make sure that they are not being overfished. overfishing is essentially catching at a faster rate than the fish can reproduce and replenish their population in the wild. And if we don't consider that, it puts a lot of pressure on the ecosystem to maintain balance, which is obviously incredibly important for a healthy ecosystem. With the increasing, again, demand of seafood, it's just even that much more important that we keep this balance in check. Another factor that we consider when we look at the sustainability is that bycatch factor, the non-target species. So whether it's a sea turtle, which all of the species of sea turtles around the world are either threatened or endangered, or if it's simply another type of fish that is going to be thrown out of the boat because it's not the desired catch. We want to be really mindful of what other species we're impacting with these fishing methods. And then also very scientifically based management practices. So using the science that the data that is gathered to determine whether or not a population or a stock is being overfished and how healthy or abundant they are in the wild, you can apply that science to create healthy and rigorous management that will keep the fishery and the ecosystem in balance. And so making sure that those plans are in place and there is enforcement that is active and ensuring that regulations are being followed is really important. And then finally, with the wild caught side of the fisheries, looking at how the fishing gear affects the habitat. So if you think about if a fish is living in a coral reef, but the gear that's being used destroys that coral reef, then the fish have nowhere to live. And so it's bad for the fishermen because they can't go back to the same habitat and continue to fish. And it's also bad for the fish because that ecosystem is then, or that habitat is destroyed, right? So using gear that will protect the habitat and again, allow for that balanced, healthy ecosystem to maintain in the wild is really important. So moving into a few aquaculture production methods, I just have a few examples of these. The two that you're looking at here, the one on the right is a bottom culture, and then the one on the left is an off bottom culture. And these are both production methods that specifically look for raising shellfish like clams and mussels and even seaweed for that matter. And the off bottom in particular, you can see on that left-hand side, it's essentially a vertical system in the water that really has very few environmental impacts. So it's a very healthy system. The one on the right, you can tend to, for the appropriate period that the mussels or seaweed or whatever you're growing needs to grow, and then you can go in and actually harvest when that time is appropriate. So moving into the final two examples for aquaculture, we have raceways on the left and then open pens on the right. So the raceways are generally not in the water system. They do mimic kind of a river-like system. And then you've got the open pens, which can be in the natural habitat of the fish or just in open waters in general. And so thinking about some of the things that you need to consider from an aquaculture perspective, the amount of feed that you're taking from a wild from a wild source. Say you're feeding things like sardines or anchovies to raise something bigger like a salmon. You want to make sure there's a balance there and not taking out an excessive amount of marine life to feed farm-raised fish, and make sure that there's some balance there. You want to be mindful of potential escapees and make sure that the fish that are in those pens are not making their way out into the wild where they're competing for habitat and food and spawning partners from native species in that area. And again, you also want to be mindful of just habitat destruction and pollution and disease, which is all something that when you have a concentrated amount of animals in one tiny little space is something you have to be mindful of. So making sure that there's balance there. Briefly touching on what the output of these assessments are. So utilizing again the criteria for wild caught fisheries to assess wild caught methods, and then aquaculture criteria to assess aquaculture production, you come out with an overall score. So we rate all those factors that I was just mentioning, and they all come together to create one overall score for the either fishery or aquaculture production. And in this example, this one is of a particular type of tuna. You can kind of see the front page of what a report might look like over here on the right. But the score for this tuna, every factor that we looked at, the abundance, and fishing mortality, the bycatch, the management, and habitat, all came out in that green rating. So this was a green, or what we call best choice overall. And that means that it is a very sustainable and a good choice. The other options that might come up, if it's been certified by a third party, like the Marines, MSC, Marine Stewardship Certification, then that's equivalent or better than our good alternative rating. And so we will defer to that certification as opposed to assessing the fishery ourselves. If it earns that yellow or good alternative rating, then that means that there are some problems with that fishery. Maybe there's some issues with bycatch, but perhaps the population is healthy. Maybe there's good management, and it protects the habitat. So, working in a more sustainable direction, but you want to be mindful. You want to still educate yourself about those particular fisheries. And then finally, if there are a lot of problems with the fishery and it's just something that is not good for the environment, it earns a score of avoid. And that is just a sign that if you see that when you pull up a rating on our website, then you just want to make a mindful, conscious decision not to purchase that type of seafood. So jumping into, this is kind of our transition into the next speakers. Some of the regularly fished and farmed species that are in your area as well. We've got tuna, which is a very popular wild-caught species. Patrick is going to be telling us about the blue swimming crab in the Philippines, which is this middle picture that you see here. And then another just very popular cultured species is this monodon. And Songlin is going to be telling us a little bit more about just aquaculture production in general. So with that, I will go ahead and wrap my portion of the program up, and we can move on.
Thank you, Sally. It's really insightful. And for the audience, hold on. If you have any question, just hold on, because we are going to throw all the question in the end of the presentation. So, Shelly, I'm going to speak in Bahasa Abi to conclude your presentation, ya. So teman-teman di Jakarta, Sally barusan aja sharing tentang beberapa option untuk penangkapan ikan yang lebih sustainable gitu. Jadi kita tidak hanya ngambil ikan, tapi kita juga harus ngelihat bahwa kapan ikan itu bisa diambil, harus memperhitungkan ikan itu bereproduksi juga, sehingga kita tidak kekurangan dan semuanya tetap balance. Seperti itu. Okay, moving along, we have another special speaker, Sonling Wang from Qingdao Marine Conservation Society. Sonling Wang has over 15 years experience in the field of China's marine ecosystem protection and sustainable seafood movement. In 2017, Sonling founded and has been chairing Qingdao Marine Conservation Society, or QMCS, a new Chinese environmental NGO specializing in coastal and marine habitat conservation and seafood sustainability. Please give virtual applause to Sonling. Sonling, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you, my host, and it's a real pleasure to be with the EduFish during this great holiday season of this very unique year. So I'm sharing the screen here. Please confirm if you can see the screen well. Okay, great.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so I will within a few minutes to walk you through the China's aquaculture sector, as this is the in terms of scale most gigantic of the world. But in the meantime, we fully recognize that the aquaculture sector has a huge existing contribution and great potential to meet the growing population's demand for food, for nutrition. But I also want to share with you some stories, some evidences of there are some dark side, downside, negative environmental impacts affiliated with irresponsible aquaculture practices. That's probably comparable to the Force in the Star Wars series. So, in that, I am hopeful that our audiences, particularly the future young leaders, would get a more holistic understanding of all the challenges around our seafood sustainability affairs and get prepared to make a difference with us. So my first slide, I borrowed it from the FAO figure. Just want to show you that we are in a very unique historical moment. So in the first time, for the first few years in human history, we are now eating more farmed fish than wild fish. And then in China, this has been the case for almost 3 decades. From early 1980s, the China's aquaculture production has already exceeded the production from the wild fisheries. And now, if you're an ordinary Chinese consumer, 4 out of 5 fish you buy or consume is from farm sources. And here I want to share just to offer a glimpse of the huge diversity of aquatic species, primarily variety of freshwater brackish and marine fish and shellfish, and also some aquatic plants farmed in China. So you can see from the volume, 80% are filter feeders, detritus feeders, herbivores, and some omnivores like tilapia. And this farming of these fish need very little or very less nutritious feed. And this, in general, has a much lower ecological footprints and have a better benefit to the environment. But worth special attention is the growing proportion of carnivorous fish, and particularly like the shrimp we are all familiar with in this Asia region, and the groupers, I'm sure, found also increasingly in Southeast Asian nations, including the Philippines, Indonesia, and Fiji. And so as Charlie just indicated, farming those carnivorous fish consumes right now a lot of marine ingredients, essentially the wild caught fish, many are small juveniles in the ocean, and this is a huge ecological footprint and also some threat to wild fish resources and also marine biodiversity that yet to be fully addressed. And this proportion of carnivorous fish farming has been growing steadily. And considering China's gigantic volume in total, so which is contributing to 60% of the global total aquaculture production. So this is a factor that we have to all bear in mind. So here is I'm showing a series of photos and a real case of even farming some very perceived to be low footprint species, the detritus feeder, can have huge negative accumulative impacts on the coastal environment. So here is a photo indicating what a intertidal mudflat look like. So this is used to be a very common and most ecologically valuable habitat of where I live, the Yellow Sea ecoregion, which is encompassed by the northeast China and the Korea Peninsula. And these areas are normally hotspots for endemic and even global biodiversity, with all those shorebirds you can see on the screen in the photo being apex predators. And this normally where you see a big gathering of water birds, shorebirds. They are always rich wild fish resources, particularly those clam beds in this area. And one of the most commercially important species and popular species is called the Manila clam. Assume that the species got first named in Philippines. And those wild stocks are sustaining very important local small-scale fishing communities' livelihoods, as well as endemic biodiversity, as said before. But unfortunately, over the past 20 years, and one of the driving factor has a huge impact from the pond aquaculture of sea cucumber is that the farmers, in order to make this otherwise not natural habitat of farming cucumbers suitable, not only convert huge areas of chemicals, including some very harmful ones that might